Hey, Jordan from Precondo here. Today I want to talk about the market. So it's been a few weeks since we've done a market update here. No surprise, the market is still down to realtors' peril, obviously. So let's jump into some of the numbers here. So by the time I post this video, it will be Canada Day. So happy Canada Day first and foremost. And there's no better way to celebrate than talking about Canada's favorite pastime, which is, of course, real estate. So let's look at the median home price. This is a tweet from my friend Dan Foch. She's a great follow for real estate data. So this is looking at February, sort of the peak of our market versus June versus today. And this is median across all housing types. So, you know, your detached home, your condo, your townhome, semi-detached, all that rolled into one. You look at Durham getting absolutely smashed at negative 26%. So you were looking at a median price of 1.2 million in February versus 885 today, which makes sense because obviously Durham saw one of the biggest bull runs through COVID at 60 to 80% depending on where in Durham. Halton's down 21%, Peel's down 20%, Toronto flat at 0% change, and York region is down 16%. So let's look at this on the Habstat graph here. You can kind of see February's peak and then just a plummet in median home value back to sort of mid last year pricing in most markets. Depends on the market, obviously, but you can see here, Halton region back to sort of October prices of last year, and similar across all regions, really. Now, the data gets a little more interesting when you isolate for freehold properties, and you see that Toronto is down 15%. So obviously on the previous slide here, we show Toronto at flat on median price, but this rolls in condos. Now, condos have been doing the heavy lifting. They have been far stickier on price. That's not to say we're not seeing an increase in inventory in the condo market, because we are. It's just that prices aren't really budging that much, maybe a 5% price reduction versus February at absolute most for centrally located condos. Obviously, when you isolate for freehold, you get a totally different picture. You see that the average sort of detached property in Toronto is down about 15%. This is that graph specifically for freehold. So you can see that Toronto, this purplish line here, you can see that it has seen price regression as well. Obviously not as rapid as a price decline as the other areas, but certainly, somewhat in line with the trend that we're seeing. Now, I have zoomed into all property types for Toronto specifically. So this graph is for the 416, not for, the GTA as a whole. And you can see when you zoom into the property types, you can see here, similar to the last graph, obviously, you have freehold taking a dip here, right? And then you can see condos doing far better. You are seeing some price regression in the median selling price of condos, but very minimal. Like I said, I'm looking at comparables every single day. I look at tens of them, and you're seeing maybe 5% price slide on condos in good buildings and good locations. So when we talk about inventory, my favorite number to distill whether we are in a buyer's or seller's market or a balanced market is, of course, months of inventory. If you're not familiar, it is simply a reduction of how many months of inventory we have on the market versus current sales trends. So, for example, if you have 1,000 listings on the market and 500 sell in a month, you have 2 months of inventory, 1,000 divided by 500, meaning that it would ostensibly take 2 months to sell all of the inventory on the market. Anything below 3 months of inventory is considered a seller's market. 3 to 5 months of inventory is a balanced market. 5 months plus is a buyer's market. You can see here that condos, we are seeing tons of inventory come to the market, and we're seeing a reduction in sales. Sales trend, sales volume is down 40% across the GTA. You're looking at something like 20-year lows for units transacted in June. But of course, that's coming off 2 of the hottest years we've ever had in terms of volume. So it makes sense that we're going to see a cooling in volume, right? And we're seeing it not just in volume, but also in price, depending on obviously the segment. With condos, we're sitting in a balanced market at just over 3 months of inventory. Freehold, interestingly enough, is still technically in a seller's market, but we are seeing price regression as of course, rates go up and we're seeing a reduction in buying power, a reduction in affordability. Also worth noting, we are seeing way more terminations than we are used to seeing. So you're seeing almost as many terminations as sales, which is of course indicative of a slowing market. Now, the thing is here, and this is important to understand, is seller expectations and buyer expectations haven't really met. You have sort of a bid-ask spread, if you want to put it that way, in stock market terms, because sellers are still looking at their January and February sales, their neighbors, saying that they want those prices, right? Some of them are the ones who need to sell are coming to reality a little bit quicker and price reducing in accordance with where the market actually is. But a lot of them are just terminating their listings and say, well, we'll try again later, because that strategy has obviously worked in the past. The market is slow, just give it a year. And in Toronto, eventually you're going to get the price that you want, right? So it's interesting to kind of see that we're seeing a lot of terminations, a lot of people just pulling off the market entirely. And that's probably something we're going to continue to see. Now, I want to show you this example up in Keswick. So this is a nice freehold property up in Keswick. If you're not familiar, I'll throw a map up on the video here. So this home sold in February for $1.24 million. It just resold for $965,500. So this isn't a case, unlikely that this is a case of somebody reselling the property shortly after closing on it. More likely, this is a failed closing, meaning that the appraisal didn't come in for the initial buyer, the buyer who bought it at $1.24 million. And so he had to walk away from his deposits and potentially now get sued for the difference in selling price. And then, of course, the sellers go on to resell the property just very recently, 5 days ago. And they sold it for, 24% less. Now, I want to talk about affordability here because a lot of people were commenting on my last video about housing affordability, which I'll put a link in the description, and said, well, housing prices are already coming down, Jordan, so your thesis is wrong. Well, the thing is, the housing prices are coming down because of rate increases. And so if rates go up in proportion and your monthly payment goes up in proportion to how far prices fall, then affordability doesn't actually improve, right? You got to remember, in highly levered markets like the GTA, where your marginal buyer is using a mortgage to purchase a property, affordability doesn't improve when prices fall relative to increased rates. So I did a little bit of math here. You can see that if you bought this in February at 2.5% mortgage rate over a 30-year period, you'd be looking at a monthly mortgage payment of $39.13 a month. Now, if you bought the same property today at a 5-year fixed at 5% over the same amortization, yes, your down payment would be lower, but your monthly mortgage payment would actually be higher at $41.22 a month. And of course, far less of that money is going to make it to principal pay down. So you look at this and you say, this home didn't actually get any more affordable. If anything, it got less affordable when you put aside the down payment factor. So it's important to remember that when you're talking about affordability. And on the topic of rates, I imagine our July meeting, the Bank of Canada is going to increase rates again in July. I would imagine 75 points as we essentially just follow exactly what the Fed does. Obviously, the Federal Reserve in the US is the most important central bank in the world, and Canada has to follow what they do to a degree in order to protect the Canadian dollar here. However, what was really interesting is with all the talk of recession, et cetera, we are actually seeing the market's price in rate cuts in 2023 to the degree of 0.75% worth of rate cuts in 2023. So it's interesting to see that the market is now assuming we're going to see rate cuts next year. Now, I reached out to my lawyer, Mark Morris, great real estate lawyer. Highly recommend him if you need a lawyer in this space. And I asked him, obviously, in the last couple of months, we've seen a lot of failed closings, meaning appraisals not coming in and sellers having to resell and or sue the original purchaser for damages. I was asking him, is that picking up or is that trend slowing down? Because what I'm seeing is it's slowing down. And he said, we are over the hill of defaults, but still happening more regularly than before the market turn, obviously. So the glut of, failed purchases, people not being able to close on the properties they purchased, that is slowing down. We are seeing that slow down. That makes sense because obviously it was a very sharp move. You look at the housing price, very sharp move to the downside. However, now people are pricing this in. And so, if you're buying a home now, it's unlikely that appraisal won't come in. Now for condos, I really couldn't find any examples of them selling for less than they were previously purchased or failed closing examples, right? I found this one in Moss Park. This one's about a 5% reduction. So it went from 681 towards the end of last year to 650K today. And then Marilyn Monroe in Mississauga. Everybody knows these buildings, some of my least favorite condo buildings. These ones, this one here sold in February for 750K and just resold for 710,000. Now, interesting note here, this particular unit last sold in 2018 for $435,000. So not exactly a bad day for the sellers. Let's talk about the rental market. The rental market is absolutely on fire. I haven't seen anything like this in a number of years. It is an absolute brutal time to be a tenant out there looking for a new rental unit. So if you look at the rentals.ca report for June of 2022, and you look at the year over year change of your average rent, Toronto's up 15.7%, Vancouver's up 19.9%, Oakville's up 8.2, and Etobicoke is up 14% year over year. You can see here when you zoom into condos, average condo rent in Toronto, you've gone from $2,057 last year to $2,474 this year. So you're talking about, over a 20% increase in rental rates in a very short period, basically a year. So we have made up for the rental decrease we saw through COVID and then some on top. Just an anecdotal example here. I pulled some numbers back in June and I looked at the last week of the CO1 district, so the downtown core of Toronto. I looked at all condo leases. So out of 262 leases, roughly 25% were going over asking. And studios at Cinema Tower that were renting for $1,350 to $1,400 mid-COVID are now seeing, well, actually, this is about a month ago, they're now seeing $1,900 a month or more. And Habestat also has some lease data. So the rental market, backing up what I said, you can see here we're peaking at about almost 30% of condo listings in Toronto are leasing for higher than their asking price, which is something you very rarely see. It only happens when the rental market is absolutely brutal. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. So rental rates are climbing quickly. Prices in condos kind of flat. Prices in freehold in the GTA are declining. There's really nowhere to hide. If you want to sell and rent, well, the rental market's brutal. The rental rates are higher than they've ever been. And so it's a difficult market. But as with any down markets, there are always opportunities. That is all I have for this week, guys. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next video.